Department. First and foremost, we want to thank all of our partners that assisted today. Arapahoe County, Douglas County, we had South Metro Fire and Falk, as well as Parker PD that assisted. I think one of the first things we want to talk about is the suspect. We have prematurely identified him as Jose de Jesus Montoya Villa. You may recognize that name. He is our suspected shooter from the church shooting on Friday. It's kind of a long list of things. I'm going to refer to my notes just because of the crime spree that started in Aurora a little bit earlier today. We got a shooting call at 3:45 at 820 North Dayton Street. We tweeted about it a little bit earlier today. A mid-20s-year-old male was shot, transported to the hospital where he has non-life-threatening injuries, thankfully. There were multiple callers and multiple shots fired in this parking lot by Jose. Again, chaotic scene, a lot of witnesses the officers are interviewing, and that was the first thing that set this spree off. The next thing is, in that same parking lot, the suspect carjacked a vehicle at gunpoint. Shortly after the carjacking, they were involved in a hit-and-run crash down the street at 11th and Dayton. So the first incident started at 3:45 with the subsequent carjacking. 3:57 was the hit-and-run crash at 11th and Dayton. About 10 minutes later at 4:10, a liquor store was robbed at 728 North Peoria Street. Luckily, no one was injured. Unsure if anything was taken there, but that was the next incident the Aurora Police Department responded to. The suspect left there and was traveling on 225, getting off on Parker, when they carjacked another car. That happened at 4:30 p.m. We had officers from every district that were converging on this area because we saw kind of the movement and patterns the suspect was having. At about 4:40 p.m., just right behind me at Jamison and Parker, a District 3 patrol unit occupied by 2 officers spotted the vehicle turning eastbound onto Jamison. The officers attempted to make a stop of the car, were confronted by this armed male. Shots were fired by the police. Jose was transported to the hospital where he has since died. Active ongoing investigation. We have our critical incident response team from the 18th Judicial District Attorney's Office that is leading this investigation. The Aurora Police Department is looking into the crime spree that led up to the officer-involved shooting, but the shooting itself is being handled by the 18th CERT team. Any questions?
Crime spree starts where and what and with what again?
3:40 p.m. in the parking lot at 820 North Dayton Street. Something happened in that parking lot. Numerous shots were fired. A mid-20s-year-old male shot, transported to the hospital, expected to survive.
The 26-year-old, was he just a bystander or was he involved?
We're not sure his exact involvement. Like I said, there were numerous shots fired. I don't know if he was aiming specifically at somebody, but we do know a 26-year-old was shot.
At what point did you know this was the same individual allegedly responsible for Friday's shooting?
It wasn't until just recently, right? So the officers followed the ambulance to a nearby hospital where the suspect was deceased. And this is kind of where we started trying to figure out their identity and when they discovered that this was Jose.
Is anyone else injured other than the 26-year-old?
Not during the crime spree, right? There may have been minor injuries in the hit-and-run crash. We can look into that. But thankfully, no other parties were injured, including our officers.
Did he fire at police officers?
That's something that we're looking into, right? So the CERT team is going to be reviewing body cams, which the officers had on them and were recording. So that's information that they're going to look into for their investigation to determine who fired, how many shots were fired, and work through that in through their investigation.
We don't know how many times the suspect was hit?
No, sir. No exact number of times the suspect was hit.
We saw a lot of police response here. Can you talk about how many departments responded?
Yeah, it was a large police response, right? Just because of the connecting violent crime cases that just happened. We had the shooting, so obviously this person was not afraid to fire their weapon. Shooting up in North Dayton, carjacked 2 different people, a hit-and-run crash. We spotted them. Thankfully, our officers were looking out for this vehicle, and they stopped the threat, right? The chief tweeted out, they stopped a violent individual, and this is 100% true. So our officers, right, we're not in Aurora right now. We're kind of in Centennial. We're kind of on the border of 3 jurisdictions, including Aurora, right? There's Douglas, Arapahoe, and Parker that are in this immediate area. So we want to thank them for their response. Arapahoe's still out here helping us divert traffic. As you can see behind me, Jamison is closed through the neighborhood, starting at Parker and a little bit deeper into the neighborhood.
maybe go into that a little bit? We just had a major shooting about a month ago with in Denver that went out to Lakewood, 2 different jurisdictions. Now we see something like this.
Sure.
How does that response get handled? How do you deal with something?
Well, it's complex, right? Crime knows no boundaries, right? This started in Aurora and ended in Centennial. When we're working through these different investigations, we go by almost like jurisdiction, right? So obviously Aurora is going to be investigating the incidents in Aurora. Because this happened in Centennial and we're part of that CERT team, is when we call in this multi-agency independent investigation because of the officer-involved shooting aspect.
Matthew, do you know what he was doing here in this area? I mean,
Well,
have family members here?
we can only assume he was trying to escape, right? The carjacking happened at 225 in Parker, just a couple miles up the road. We can only assume that he was trying to escape. We don't know if there's any connections to this area specifically.
Was there any inkling after Friday's incident that this individual had the propensity to do what he's accused of doing today? In other words, he'd go on some sort of...
Yeah, I don't think investigators knew on Friday and through the coming days that this is how it was going to end. Investigators have been hard at work since Friday night, around the clock, not only trying to locate him, but kind of piece together what led up to the shooting. I'm thankful that we found him. It's unfortunate that it ended the way it did. I'm glad our officers are safe.
There was a tweet from the police chief in Aurora saying, thank goodness none of the police officers were hurt. Just want to kind of speak for her in a bit and just talk about the safety of the police officers.
Of course, we're all relieved that none of our officers were hurt. We obviously saw the actions of this guy in North Aurora where he shot recklessly at people and ended up shooting somebody. He then drove down and robbed a liquor store at gunpoint, carjacked another person at gunpoint. This is obviously someone that wasn't afraid to use his weapon. We're all relieved that no officers were hurt, and we're relieved that a violent criminal has now been taken off the street.
Now, can you tell me what if the first party was in Dayton at 8? What he was doing that area?
I wish we knew. That's something that we're going to interview witnesses about. Obviously, there's numerous people at the shooting at 820 North Dayton. We're going to try to interview them and see if he had any connection to any of them, or if this was, he got desperate and went there and did these types of things, right? These are all answers we're going to be looking for through our investigation. Anything else, guys? So I appreciate you guys being out here. We're going to put out a news release here shortly. It kind of details some of the things that we've talked about tonight. If you guys have any questions, just let us know.
Agent, based on that narrative, today's narrative, you don't think he knew any of these folks, right?
Unknown if there's any connection
Okay.
between the people
Got
that were involved today or not.
Thanks so much.
Mm-hmm.